Welcome to Hell again. This is a setup by Theodor Divic, Jewish mystical theater company that's doing a play here. It ran last week, it's running this weekend. It's based on a 16th century exorcism, and so I've seen it. It's incredibly powerful. There's a handful of tickets left for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If you haven't gotten it yet and you want to go, now's the time. Speaking of hell, here we go. Dante's Inferno, and this is our passage. Midway in our life's journey, I went astray from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in a dark wood. How shall I say what wood that was? I never saw so drear, so rank, so arduous a wilderness. Its very memory gives a shape to fear. Now, if this is your first time at PRS and then at the President's class, what we do here is, in this series, is we take a passage. This is called Passages. We take a passage from the world's great literature and sacred texts and other things, and we read the passage, then I provide some context, and then we interpret the text to help find our way to wisdom through the text. So let's begin with context for Dante Alighieri. All right? Our actual knowledge of Dante's life is really pretty sketchy. And if you're the kind to psychoanalyze a writer, you're going to have a lot of things to work with here. We know that his mother died when he was very young. His father remarried, and that Dante was completely orphaned in adolescence. This is John Ciardi's introduction, Archibald MacLeish's introduction, and he goes right for the psychoanalysis. He says, this is thought to account for a certain hunger for parental affection, which can be noted in the comedy. Okay. It is an interesting fact that many of the founders of the world's religions were orphaned. They did not have mothers or fathers. So we can make of that whatever you think. Those are his dates, and this is the best description of Dante I've read. A penniless exile convicted of a felony, separated under pain of death from home, family, and friends. His life seemed to have been cut off in the middle. Now, you cannot understand Dante Alighieri without understanding Beatrice. Beatrice is more than a muse here. She's an object of desire, and she actually appears as a character in the comedy, especially in the Purgatorio. Sorry, new setup, trying to figure out how to work it. Okay, so there is a book that Dante wrote before the comedy called Vita Nuova, The New Life, and it is based on Beatrice. He writes this in La Vita Nuova. In that book, which is my memory, on the first page of the chapter, that is the day when I first met you, appear the words, here begins a new life. First day he met Beatrice, they were 9. In fact, it was exactly, reading from La Vita again, it was exactly the 9th hour of that day when her intoxicatingly lovely greeting came to me. She was 9. And since it was the first time her words had reached my ears, I felt such bliss that I withdrew from people as if I were drunk, away to the solitude of my room, and settled down to think about this most graceful of women. She was 9. And thinking about her, a sweet sleep came over me, in which appeared a tremendous vision. A vision of Beatrice. Quote, I say that when she appeared in whatever place, by the hope embodied in that marvelous greeting, for me no enemy remained. In fact, I shone with a flame of charity that made me grant pardon to whoever had offended me. And if anyone had then asked me anything, my reply would have been love, with an aspect of full humility. Now, this was published in 1292 in the vernacular. What does that mean? It means it wasn't Latin. It means it wasn't done. But his first work, you may know that the comedy is itself in Italian, or the vernacular of the time, because it wasn't Latin. Again, this was not done, so this is a major feature of the comedy, or of which the Inferno is a part, is that he wanted to speak in his native tongue. And here he is, speaking in his native tongue and integrating a fascinating and profound numerology. Quote, "Wherefore it would appear that this number, 3, was thus allied unto her for the purpose of signifying that at her birth all these 9 heavens were at perfect unity with each other as to their influence. This is one reason that may be brought, but more narrowly considering, and according to the infallible truth, this number was her own self, that is to say, by similitude. As thus, follow his logic of love. The number 3 is the root of the number 9. Seeing that without the interposition of any other number, being multiplied merely by itself, it produces 9. As we manifestly perceive that 3 times 3 are 9. Thus 3 being of itself the efficient of 9, and the great efficient of miracles, this is all capitalized, the great efficient of miracles being of himself 3 persons, to wit the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which being 3 are also 1. This lady was accompanied by the number 9 to the end that men might clearly perceive her to be a 9. I know, it sounds funny today, doesn't it? That is a miracle, whose only root is in the Holy Trinity. It may be that a more subtle person would find for this thing a reason of greater subtlety, but such is the reason that I find, and I like this best. So, very briefly, again, the opening words are, here begins a new life, and my reply is love. Sorry, I'm behind. Very briefly, it's the story of a boy of 9, suddenly awakening to love at 9, at the sight of a girl almost exactly the same age. He has a second encounter with her at what age? 18, because it's always going to be divisible by 3. When a greeting is exchanged between them at 18, he's not spoken to her for 9 years. He explains to her, as men sometimes do to women, how life has been unfair to him. Like, this is what you want to hear, right? Of the tribulations and misunderstandings in his life, and this leads to her disapproval, as it always does. Then her sudden death when the poet was 25, and his grief and attempted consolation by another woman. Finally, this is the story of a marvelous vision of his Beatrice when he was 27, again, thus completing the trinity of knots and determining him to write no more of her until he could do so worthily. Although it is autobiographical, the Vita Nuova is not an autobiography. It's a delicate and sensitive analysis of emotions, something that does not get a lot of treatment in the Middle Ages. Such facts as enter into it assume an air of strange unreality. Now, this is about La Vita. We haven't even gotten to the comedy yet. So, what do we know of this man, the poet? Well, he was poet, politician, husband, and he was a traitor, in quotation marks. I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but you should know that in 1289 he took part in the battle and the capture of Caprona, In 1295, yes, sorry. In 1295 appears the first record of his political activity, seeking public office. That same 1299, he gets an ambassadorship. That year he marries Gemma Donati, and then in 1300 in Florence is war in the streets. And after that there are the purge trials. Dante picked what appeared to be the right side, but then things flipped and it was suddenly the wrong side. And so he was exiled from his beloved Florence. He was accused of graft and corruption in office, and he was away when all this happened, so he simply stayed away until he died. So again, a man in exile, and his life in exile was not pleasant. He spent most of his time at Ravenna and was an honored guest of Guido Novella da Polenta, a name you will not know. But he is the nephew of Francesca da Rimini, a name you will know very soon. On the way back from a diplomatic mission to Venice, he fell ill and died soon after his return. And in Paradise, the third section of the comedy, he left a poignant description of what his life was like in exile. Thou shalt prove how salty tastes another's bread, and how hard a path it is to go up and down another person's stairs. I love that. Okay, so what is the comedy of Dante Alighieri? It is a comedy, first of all, meaning that it is not a tragedy. Now, a comedy, by calling it a comedy, Dante is simply referring to one of two types of plays from ancient Greece. A tragedy always ends in disaster and death. A comedy usually ends in marriage, or at least happiness. So this is a comedy. Now, the Inferno is not a comedy. The comedy comes with Paradiso, the final section of the comedy. This is a poem as protest. Dante had gone through the political chaos of his day, and he saw what a menace it was to the human search for happiness and meaning. Sorry, we don't have any reference for that today, but this was the Middle Ages. He used the comedy as a way to protest this, and if you've read the comedy, you know it's a revenge poem in a lot of ways. It's a lot of things, but one of the things it is a revenge poem, and it's brutal. He prepared for the comedy in exile. And again, this happens all the time. It's happened to me, and I bet it's happened to you. Before you produce your best work, you must be in exile. Well, I don't know if you must be, but you're often in exile, right? You have to go to a place where you're starkly alone and depressed and confused and out of sorts. And only after you move through that place can you produce what it is you are meant to produce. Only after that can you give to the world what you're supposed to give to the world according to your path. And so while he was in exile, he was reading, preparing, sad, lonely. You saw his face in the painting. And then he decides in this exile that Italian, the language Italian, will be the medium of this great work. Again, an incredible choice for this time, because Latin is the language of the church, It's the language of the universities, which were founded during this time, by the way. The university that you went to, the very idea of that was founded during this time. And so, he also wants his threes. Three's very important to him, and man, are there threes everywhere in the comedy. 3 equal parts, Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso, okay? They are all separate but unique, separate and unique, but also unified, like the Trinity, of course. Each part actually represents one person of the Trinity. Inferno is the Father and punishment. Purgatory, the Son, and wisdom. Paradise, the love of the Holy Spirit. Each part, or cantica, contains 33 cantos for a total of 99. And if we add the first introductory canto, we obtain a grand total of 100, which is awesome, right? Because that's the square of 10. And 10 is the perfect number, right? The square of the Trinity plus 1 equals the unity of God. This is very powerful stuff. I kind of laugh at it, but I actually have my own numerology that I like, that I'm not going to tell you about, because it might be seen as not healthy. But I think I'm not the only one who does this, who's like, oh, I like that. I like these 3 things lined up, or 5. My number is actually 9, but not for these reasons. All right. And then there's the poetic form itself, Terza Rima, which is awesome and new. He created this. So check this out. That's another painting of Dante in exile. So, this is the rhyme scheme. And I know that looks weird, but check it out. You'll see the pattern. Moreover, you'll hear the pattern. Here's a great poem by the wonderful poet Richard Wilbur called Terza Rima. Listen to it and look at the colored rhymes. In this great form, as Dante proved in hell, there is no dreadful thing that can't be said in passing. Here, for instance, one could tell how our jeep skidded sideways toward the dead enemy soldier, I read that terribly. How our jeep skidded sideways toward the dead enemy soldier with the staring eyes, bumping a little as it struck his head, and then flew on as if toward paradise. That's a lovely little allusion and dialogue with Dante. But notice the pattern there. Really amazing. Dante invented this. He invented this poetic form just for his journey. All right. Let's get into hell and the text. Our passage tonight is the very first thing in the very first canto. Midway in our life's journey, I went away from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in a dark wood. How shall I say what wood that was? I never saw so drear, so rank, so arduous a wilderness. Its very memory gives a shape to fear. Midway in our life's journey, all right? We talked about this a lot in the president's class on Tuesday night. By the way, if you're new and uncomfortable, usually this is not set up like this, so I hope you'll come back when it's not hell. There's a lot more room, and it's a little brighter. You can see each other. Midway in our life's journey, something often happens in mid-30s, and this is Dante's, I think he's 33 actually. I don't know if it happened to you, it certainly happened to me, it happened to Jesus, it happened to Muhammad, it happened to Buddha. There's something about this time of life. It's midlife, right? It's, if you assume a 70-year lifespan, this is midlife. It's an appropriate point for reflection because it's all downhill after here. So you might want to get your shit together. Right? Midway in our life's journey. But this is it, right? It's more than that. It's, for those of you not yet 35, let me tell you what this is about, because those of us over 35 get to do that. I didn't make the rules. It's just, I think by 35, now I should say this does not apply to me because my life has been an anachronism completely. Like I had my midlife crisis at 50 and started acting like I was 19, but that's neither here nor there. But what happened, the reason this is significant is that by 35, you've kind of tried out everything. Or if not everything, most things. You've tried out this path. Oh, let me try to be this way. You know, and you try on these identities like clothes. And sometimes you just wear the same clothes the rest of your life. I actually envy people like that. I don't know how you do it. But you try on your first set of clothes and you're like, yeah, this is good. I'm going to be this way the rest of my life. Good for you, I guess. More of us, I think, have to try on other clothes. And in our youth, you know, sometimes we're like, oh, you know, I think I'll be this way. I think I'll be this kind of person and do this kind of thing. And then that's cool, but then as you go further toward the midway of life's journey, you kind of lose some agency and things start happening to you. And life, or as Dante would say, fortune changes your clothes for you. And that's the hardest part, right? Where actually the universe will strip you naked and beat you to a pulp sometimes. And then you have to get up and you find yourself like this midway in our life's journey, alone in a dark wood. So 35 is not an arbitrary thing. It's just a kind of median for when you've kind of examined the paths of life that you're going to examine, most of us, many of us, and now you have to choose, or not. In any case, it's a time of great disorientation, and what comes from that is alienation. I went astray from the straight road. Well, yeah, you did. You should, because that straight road is not yours. That's the road that was given to you. That's those paths that you've been on. And you know what? You didn't make those up. Somebody handed you those. Mostly, or the first path, your parents or your family handed you. Then maybe your church or your temple or your mosque handed you one. And then maybe your girlfriend or your boyfriend handed you one. Those are the paths you've tried out. They weren't yours. That's fine. Try them out. I'm a great believer in the via negativa of life. You find your way by finding what's not your way. So try them all. Jackson Browne writes in one of his songs, let your illusions last until they shatter. Yeah, let them last. Smoke them down to the filter, to steal from Tom Waits. Truly, because if you don't, and if you're like me, you'll always be wondering, you know, I broke off from that path. Wonder what my life would be if I didn't follow it to the end. Now, following it to the end, it's going to almost kill you. But that's okay, because this is a process that moves toward death. Death of your old self. And it's also about middle age, when you realize that sometimes, many of us, you realize that you're not alive anyway. One of my favorite novels is James Dickey's Deliverance. I grew up in the South, and a lot of those images, and the dialogue especially, something I know. And it begins with four, they're really Coca-Cola executives in Atlanta, but he can't say that. But they're in Atlanta and they work for a soft drink company. So And they're sitting around, well, one of them does, and they're sitting around, they're businessmen. They're going to go run this river before it's dammed, right? And you can't run it anymore. And they're just restless. They're bored. You know, they love their wives, they love their kids, their job's okay, but they're restless. Midway in their life's journey, they were ready to go astray from the straight road, because the straight road was boring, meaningless, because it wasn't their road. You know how you get your road? You got to go through hell. Sorry. Again, I don't make the rules. And you know what? It's scary as hell. Sorry for the hell puns. Some are intentional, some are not. That was not intentional. How shall I say what wood that was? How shall I say? Well, he's being a little playful as a poet here, because he then spends 34 cantos, explaining how dreary that wood was. But the point is that he is now already beyond his normal means of processing information. He's alone in a dark wood, and I don't know what to say about this wood, because it's different. I've crossed over some line, and it's dreary, it's rank, it's arduous. Its very memory now gives a shape to fear. So as sometimes I think we seekers get sold this notion that we're going seeking. Hey, let's go seeking. And seeking is awesome, and we're going to have a great time. We'll Instagram it. It'll be great. We'll do Facebook posts about it. And we'll meet so many people. And the first step on the journey is into a dark wood. And it's dreary and it's terrifying. If it's not terrifying, you haven't begun yet. You haven't. Because you're moving from your mundane life. You might even say your profane life into another life that is sacred. And this cannot be given. It cannot be easily won. In fact, it involves your death in some real sense, at least the death of your previous life. How shall I say what wood that was? I never saw so drear, so rank, so arduous a wilderness. Its very memory gives a shape to fear. This is the very definition of the sacred according to many theorists of religion like Rudolf Otto. A feeling of an experience of a tremendous mystery and fascination and fear. This is our previous artist in residence, David Orr's mandala of a piece from the Divine, an illustration from the Divine Comedy. By the way, the Divine Comedy has been illustrated by lots and lots of people, and I'm going to show you at the end, while we're talking, I'm going to give you a slideshow of one of them that I think is really special. All right. Tell me about this place, Dante, this dark wood. Death could scarce be more bitter than that place. It's worse than death. But since it came to good, I will recount all that I found there revealed by God's grace. Okay, good, because, it would be silly if you stopped there. How I came to it, I cannot rightly say. So drugged and loose with sleep had I become when I first wandered there from the true way. Now, this journey is different in that Dante is going to come back to reaffirm the place where he started. That's not right. I understand why he does it. He's a Christian. This is done to reaffirm Christianity, especially in the Middle Ages and right before the Renaissance. So understand his narrative drive to do that. But that's not how the journey works. The journey's not a circle. It's a spiral. And he got this part right. Hell is a spiral down, right? So you don't cross the same path or the same point ever. It's all new and it's all going down. So drugged and loose with sleep. Yeah, that's how you feel after you've completed the journey through hell. You look back and you think, what was I thinking? What was I doing? Why was I living that way? And I'm terrible about this. Like, I go through a hell and I look back and I'm like, God, I was such an idiot. I wasn't an idiot. I just was where I was, you know? And you gotta forgive yourself for being drugged and loose with sleep and not knowing how you got there or why. It's very dangerous to judge that. But at the far end of that valley of evil, whose maze had sapped my heart with fear, I found myself before a little hill. Yeah, you did. You always do. Because it is not paved with gold, Dorothy, I'm sorry. It's not the yellow brick road, although she has her own struggles. I lifted up my eyes. This hill's shoulders glowed already with the sweet rays of that planet whose virtue leads men straight on every road. And the shining strengthened me against the fright whose agony had racked the lake of my heart through all the terrors of that piteous night. Well, good for you. This is not going to last, right? You see a hill, there's a sun shining on it. It's a trick, all right? And when you cross over into this sacred world, you know, throughout your journey, you're going to think you're done. And you're not done. And so, as soon as I've done this many times, as soon as you cross over, you're like, oh, beautiful hill. That's the hill I've been looking for. It's not. Because there's always a threshold guardian, or two or three. You don't get to walk straight to the hill, I'm sorry. That's far too easy and you're not going to learn anything. One of the great illustrators of Dante is William Blake. The sun shines down from this hilltop and Dante attempts to climb toward it, but he's blocked by a leopard, a lion, and a she-wolf, because you're always going to be blocked. And they force him to turn back in fear of his life. And so he turns back. Lesson 1, right? It's not that easy. And nobody, the sacred does not let you earn your wisdom that easily. And so you must turn back, and you don't get to the hill. Here's what you do get. As he returns to the glen defeated, the poet Virgil appears. And he writes this: I wavered back, and still the beast pursued, forcing herself, the she-wolf especially, against me bit by bit, till I slid back into the sunless wood. And as I fell to my soul's ruin, a presence gathered before me on the discolored air. The figure of one who seemed hoarse from a long silence. At sight of him in that friendless way, I cried, have pity on me, some hero. Have pity on me, whatever thing you are, whether shade or living man. And it replied, not man, though man I once was, and my blood was Lombard, and both my parents Mantuan. I was born, though late, and bred in Rome under Augustus, in the noon of the false and lying gods. I was a poet and sang of old Anchises' noble son, who came to Rome after the burning of Troy. But you, why do you return to these distresses instead of climbing that mountain of joy, which is the seat and first cause of your bliss? Dante does not answer the question. You will find this throughout the journey, that the potential hero, the seeker, keeps missing the message. Right? The helper is always trying to say, here's the big picture, and the seeker is always like, where'd you get that coat? I'm only exaggerating a little bit. If you ever read the Gospels, the disciples are the dumbest people on the planet. Jesus says, this is not exactly right, but for an example, he says, I'm a door. I am the door. They're like, well, you're a door? They're really dumb. As all seekers are at this stage. Are you Virgil? That fountain of purest speech? My voice grew tremulous. Glory and light of the poets. Now may that zeal and love's apprenticeship that I poured out on your heroic verses serve me well. For you are my true master and first author, the soul maker, from whom I drew the breath of that sweet style whose measures have brought me honor. Here's another mistake. Your mentor is not your source. That is not what you're seeking. Your mentor, your helper, helps you. He is not the end, or she is not the end of your journey. You'll see Dante do this over and over. He's so overwhelmed by the presence of Virgil, the greatest poet of Rome, that he keeps praising Virgil, and Virgil's like, let's get on with it. There's stuff to be done here. There are places to go. And Dante keeps praising. If you have a mentor, I understand, or a helper on your journey, I understand that. I've done it myself. I overpraise my mentors. But that's just a distraction. And the more you do that, the slower you go on the journey. All right. How far are we into hell? Not very far. Okay. Let's go into Canto 2. I'm not going to do all 9 levels because we'd be here for days. 3 days, as a matter of fact. So I want to give you a sense of the text of the Inferno, but also the larger journey, because both of these are very important. And so we'll do the first 3 and then the last 3. This is Inferno. The light was departing. The brown air drew down. This is Dore, by the way, another great illustrator. The brown air drew down all the earth's creatures, calling them to rest from their day roving, as I, one man alone, prepared myself to face the double war of the journey and the pity. Yes, the double war of the journey and the pity. If I had been able to subtract the pity from my journey, I'd be so wise I could make you all follow me and we could really become a cult here. But no, my pity was so important to me. In fact, I think I spent most of my energy on my pity, not on the journey itself. So, genius insight here. I prepared myself to face the double war of the journey and the pity, which memory shall here set down, nor hesitate, nor err. And then here's the invocation to the muses that you always get. O muses, O high genius, be my aid. O memory, recorder of the vision, here shall your true nobility be displayed. All right, so Dante, let's not miss what's happened here. Apart from being a seeker on a journey, Dante has also rhetorically placed himself in the company of Virgil. All right? Now, it's hard to convey to you what Virgil meant to Rome, but it was maybe in some ways, well, I think certainly in some ways, more than Homer meant to the Greeks. Virgil was sacred. And here Dante is putting himself, oh, it's you. This is why I studied so hard. This is why I've worked so hard, so I can be with you, because, basically we're the same. It's a little stringent, but you'll see. And then he says, appropriately, how can I go with you? You're too great. You guys warm? Another hell joke. Are you okay? How can I be worthy? There's St. Paul. There's Aeneas. How should I dare to follow you? By whose permission? Why could you believe me worthy of this vision? How then may I presume to this high quest and not fear my own brashness? You are wise and will grasp what my poor words can but suggest. I think Dante's being a little coy here, but that doesn't matter. The insight about the seeker, the journeyer, is true. You don't feel worthy. When the helper comes along, the helper's been through the journey. She knows things. You don't know these things. And so it's very easy to see the distance between you two. Every mentor I've ever had, I never thought I would be where he or she was. But I am, because I kept going on the journey. And the helper knows this. This is another distraction you've got to avoid. Overestimating your helper and underestimating yourself. You can do this. Every human being on the planet has gone through the journey. Sometimes they don't know it. Sometimes it just seems like a haze, but we've all gone through the journey. All right. Virgil is a genius. He says, look, you know why I'm here? He's like, no. Beatrice sent me. What? Beatrice sent you? She's concerned about you. What? All right, he's in. Right? He's all in now. She is, of course, more than a human woman. She is the symbol of divine love. She is God's representation of love. And she actually ends up leading Dante through the Purgatorio. She comes into hell to ask Virgil to help Dante. I love this. And Virgil also represents reason. And reason must lead him, but can only take him so far. Now, this is the Middle Ages. There's a whole background of St. Thomas Aquinas and scholasticism that I'm not going to bore you with, but reason's very important. Almost as important as Christianity, but not quite as important. Beatrice sends the prayers of the Virgin Mary and of St. Lucia, divine light, and Rachel, the contemplative life. All of this figures in. Virgil says this, therefore, for your own good, I think it well that you follow me, and I will be your guide, and lead you forth to an eternal place. There you shall see the ancient spirits tried in endless pain, and hear their lamentation, which bemoans the second death of souls. All right, I want to get going here. This is one of the most interesting parts of hell, the vestibule. I love this painter, Giovanni di Paolo. This is amazing. And you see there's movement in the painting here. So the poets pass through the gates of hell, and they are assailed by the cries of anguish coming from the hole in the ground. And they see the first of the souls that they will see. These are the opportunists, those who in life were neither good or for good or evil. They didn't make a decision. They just took care of themselves. And then there's also, apparently there was a whole set of angels who did not take a side in the war for heaven. They're there. So the point being, they're neither in hell nor outside of it because they couldn't make a decision in life. Right? Now you'll see, they race round and round, pursuing a wavering banner that runs forever through the dirty air. And then they are pursued by swarms of wasps and hornets who sting them and produce a constant flow of blood and pus, which trickles down the bodies of the sinners and is feasted upon by loathsome worms and maggots who coat the ground. Okay. So, the law here is not lex talionis from the ancient Babylonian lawgiver Hammurabi. It's not an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's not what's happening here. This is poetic justice, right? So Dante is not going to punish them for the exact things they did. He's going to punish them metaphorically for the things. And this is the genius of the Inferno, is the metaphorical dimension. Their sin was a darkness, so they move in darkness. As their own guilty conscience pursued them in life, so they are pursued by wasps and hornets. A guilty conscience is kind of like a wasp, isn't it? Always stinging you. And their actions were a moral filth, so they eternally run through filth of worms and maggots, which on which they themselves feed. He sees the first pope here. He's going to get some revenge here. And then they move on to Acheron, the first of the rivers of hell. And this is what they see. Now, we know, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. But here's the whole thing. I am the way into the city of woe. This is the gate of hell. So remember, these other people, they couldn't decide, so they're kind of just outside hell. But now we've gone through hell, or we're about to, and here's what the gate reads. I'm the way into the city of woe. I'm the way to a forsaken people. I am the way into eternal sorrow. Sacred justice moved my architect. I was raised here by divine omnipotence. Primordial love, ordeal love, and ultimate intellect, only those elements time cannot wear, were made before me. And beyond time, I stand. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. We're repainting the auditorium on the outside, and I suggested. I guarantee you Angelinos would flock to that. All right, so let me speed up our journey into hell a little bit. So here, this is really interesting. Canto 4, Circle 1, Limbo. So there's the vestibule. Now we've gone through the gate. Here's Limbo. The virtuous pagans. What do you do with Virgil, for example? Dante wakes to find himself, because he passes out several times. He's just swooning. He's overwhelmed. That's okay. You know, you're going to pass out a few times on your journey. The poets can see that this is a great funnel-shaped cave lying below the northern hemisphere, and there's a series of ledges that take you down, and Dante calls these ledges a circle. All right, the poets cross into the first circle, and here they find the virtuous pagans. They were born before Christ, okay, and therefore they cannot be in heaven. In fact, they have to be in hell, in the first circle. What did they do? Nothing. They didn't know about Christ. But yes, they did. Because, as Christian theologians such as Aquinas, as I mentioned, and Augustine will say, they had the natural law of God. Really? Okay. They could have deduced God from the way the universe works. Yeah. So, all these great thinkers and writers, Homer, Horace, Ovid, Lucan, they greet Virgil. And Dante enters the citadel of human reason. And all these pagan, brilliant writers and thinkers. But they cannot get out because they did not know Christ. They didn't know Christ because they were living before Christ, but okay. And then my favorite. What are you laughing at?
Oh, it was funny the way you said it.
This is my favorite circle of hell. You don't have a favorite circle? We all should have.
Probably a virtuous pagan. On my good days.
So this is the second circle. This is the hell proper. Minos is there, and he judges what circle they go to by how many coils is in his tail. It's really dramatic and awesome. And something happens that happens several times is that Minos says, no, you can't come in here. But Virgil's now with him. And Virgil kind of says, hey, don't you know who I am? And this happens 3, 4, maybe more times. Remember, the first encounter with the threshold guardian was the she-wolf and the leopard and the lion. And Dante just ran away. Now he has a helper. Now he has a guide. They find themselves on a dark ledge, and there's a great whirlwind going around. And it spins within it the souls of the carnal, right? Those who gave in to their appetites. And there are several of them. These are people who had too much sex and too much fun. Dido is here. That is bullshit. I'm sorry. Dido does not belong here. She was wronged, and all she did was love Aeneas. So I protest that. Cleopatra, really, I know what that's about, right? Helen, poor Helen. She gets blamed for everything. Achilles, yeah, that's good. That's fine. Paris and Tristan, but the greatest couple there is Paolo and Francesca. What's Francesca's last name? De Rimini, right? Dante stayed with her nephew when he was in exile. And they pause, and Dante will do this a lot in the Inferno. He'll ask people, what's up? I mean, they're being tormented. He'd be like, do you have a second? So, here is the text. Turning from those spirits once again, I said, Francesca, what you suffer here melts me to tears of pity and of pain. And this is Dante through most of the levels of hell. He's too compassionate, according to the rhetoric of the text. What you suffer here melts me to tears of pity and of pain. But tell me, in the time of your sweet sighs, by what appearances found love the way to lure you to this perilous paradise? Paradise. Why? Because they're still in love, right? That's a nice nod to the power of love. And she, the double grief of a lost bliss, is to recall its happy hour in pain. Let me say that again, see if this resonates with any of you. The double grief of a lost bliss is to recall its happy hour in pain. I think memory is one of the greatest torturers of the human species. To hold on to a memory of loss, is to be tortured, as if you're in a circle of hell. She says, your guide and teacher knows the truth of this. But if there is indeed a soul in hell, to ask of the beginning of our love out of his pity, so she's responding to this pity that will later be deemed inappropriate, I will weep and tell. One day for dalliance we read the rhyme of Lancelot, Paolo and Francesca, how love had mastered him. We were alone with innocence and dim time. Ah, what a great line. We were alone with innocence and dim time. Pause after pause, that high old story drew our eyes together while we blushed and paled, but it was one soft passage that overthrew our caution and our hearts. For when we read how her fond smile was kissed by such a lover, he who is one with me, alive and dead, breathed on my lips the tremor of his kiss. That book and he who wrote it was a pander. That day we read no further. Great erotic poetry in hell. Dante says, as she said this, the other spirit who stood by her, Paolo, wept so piteously I felt my senses reel and faint away with anguish. There, he's fainting all the time. I was swept by such a swoon as death is, and I fell as a corpse might fall to the dead floor of hell. Okay, you're gonna have to do better, Dante. You need to get it together. Circle 3, the gluttons. Look at this image. I'm going to tell you what that is falling from the sky, and you're not going to like it. Okay, so Dante wakes up, and I guess Virgil's carried him into the third circle. How are we doing? Third circle? Oh my God. I'm in the third circle. This is Dante. I'm in the third circle of the torments, here to all time with neither pause nor change. The frozen rain of hell descends in torrents. Huge hailstones, dirty water, and black snow pour from the dismal air to putrefy the putrid slush that waits for them below. Here monstrous Cerberus, the ravening beast, howls through his triple throats like a mad dog over the spirit sunk in that foul paste. His eyes are red, his beard is greased with phlegm, his belly is swollen, his hands are claws to rip the wretches and flay and mangle them. And they too howl like dogs in the freezing storm, turning and turning from it as if they thought one naked side could keep the other warm. This is a giant garbage dump, to be polite about it. The souls of these damned lie in icy paste. They're swollen and obscene. These are the gluttons. In life, they made no higher use, again, poetic justice, not lex talionis, poetic justice. In life, they made no higher use of the gifts of God than to wallow in food and drink, producers of nothing but garbage and shit. Here they lie through all eternity themselves, like shit, half buried in their own shit, while Cerberus slavers over them, as they slaved in life over their food, slavered in life over their food. There's a guy he knows there, because, what's up? Tiago, the hog, he's called, and he asks for news of Florence, and this happens a lot. It's really weird. Okay, so circles 4 through 8. I just want to highlight some things here. Here's a Canto 7. I love this line. There's so many lines that you kind of pass over in the narrative part. You'd want to see what happens next, but there's these moments like this that I just love, poetic moments. But the stars that marked our starting fall away. This is Virgil. We must go deeper into greater pain, for it is not permitted that we stay. No, it's not. I'm sorry. It's not permitted for you to stay. And you know what? Your orientation, your map will disappear. And it's just you and your helper. You must go deeper, and to go deeper is to go into greater pain. This is the law of the journey. This is the law of hell and of life. All right. Let's see. Yeah, there's Filippo Argenti, whom Dante hates, and he kind of gleefully watches him be shredded. This is funny. In Canto 9, the Furies appear. Right? I know, right? The Furies, half woman, half serpent. They shriek and laugh when they notice Dante, and they call for Medusa.
Yes.
Calm down. They want Medusa to come turn him into stone. And Virgil covers Dante's eyes so that he will not see Medusa's head. Medusa got a raw deal, and this is, wrong, according to the truth that I see. But that we won't get into that. What's interesting here is what follows. An enormous noise from behind scatters the Furies. And Virgil and Dante turn to see a messenger from heaven crossing the river Styx. souls and demons fleeing before them like flies. He arrives at the gate. And what a perfect moment to show the passing of a mythology, right? If you look for this in world mythology, you'll see it, where the story is recording the move from one story to another by dismissing the characters of the other story. It happens with Gilgamesh and Ishtar. It happens here where the Furies come. Oh God, here comes Medusa. It's like in The Wire. Omar's coming. No? Wow. No Wire references? Thank you. Omar's coming. No, thank you. Thank you, the three cool people. Medusa's coming. And then what overwhelms Medusa and the Furies is heaven. What a perfect little parable of the shift in mythology from the Roman, Greek mythos to the Christian mythos. All right, Dante chats with some more people along the way. At one point, there's a bunch of people who are encased in ice, and he accidentally kicks a guy in the head. And he's like, oh, I know you. Kicks him in the head. Because they're enclosed in ice. Anyway, let's see, what else should you know? So much. I hope you'll read this on your own. There's a whole discourse in hell on why money earning interest, usury, is a sin. In hell, they're having this discourse. It's because money isn't a thing, and you can't make a thing out of a no thing. Huge sin in the Middle Ages. Can you imagine? There's in Canto 12, there's a moment where they're passing by, and just really interesting. Virgil says, oh, this wasn't, what does he say? There's a rock that had fallen, and he said, this wasn't like this the last time I was through here. Oh, that's genius, right? Because when was the last time he was through there? It was before Christ, right? So if you remember when Christ was crucified, there was a great earthquake. Right? And it shook hell. And so Virgil's like, oh, yeah, that wasn't like that before. I miss the old days. Oh my God, yeah. And Alexander, a whole bunch of other people are in the seventh circle, such as Alexander the Great, sure. Attila the Hun, you could go further, I think. But where's Devon? Dionysus. Seventh circle of hell. What do you think of that?
He gets around.
Yes, he does. All right. Oh, and this one, sorry. There's so many. Canto 13 is the suicides. Why? There's a common misperception that Christianity, that the Bible has a prohibition against suicide. It does not. Christianity does. And this is where this is coming from. If you wanted poetic justice for a suicide and you thought suicide was a sin, how would you depict it? Dante makes them trees. They're trees. Because once you make that decision, you can't move anymore. It's a permanent position that locks you into place, like a tree. You're rooted with that last decision. And of course, he's got to make it a lot more dramatic. Virgil has him snap off a twig and they start crying and stuff. I wonder if that's where Frank Baum got them in The Wizard of Oz. Okay, we got to keep going through hell. Eighth circle. Jason of mythology because he abandoned Medea. I'm okay with that. Yeah. Let's see, what else? Yeah, there's a lot of churchmen here in the lower depths of hell. Oh, right. Marcella, you're here. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, there's a bunch of sinners they're marching around, but their heads are turned around. They're pointing the wrong way. These are the astrologers, the diviners, and the magicians.
That was subtle.
Okay. There's so much. I apologize for skipping, but we would never end. Here are the circles of hell. Limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, anger, heresy, violence, fraud. Let's go to Cocytus. Circle 9 and the canto. Here we are in the 9th circle, and Dante is still saying how he can't describe what he's seeing, and then goes on to describe what he's seeing. The first ring of the 9th circle of hell, as you go down, there's like more divisions within each circles. It gets really confusing. And so I think here there's like 9 different spaces within the 9th circle of hell. The first, ring of the 9th circle of hell is called Cana, after Cain, who killed his brother Abel. And they're frozen face to face, the two, Abel and Cain, butting their heads against each other in rage. They go down and down and down, and the drama rises, of course. There before them finally, they actually meet 2 giants who kind of set them down into the very last pit of hell, where they see Satan. And he has wings, and they beat, because he's encased in ice. He's trying to get out, so he's trying to free himself from the ice, but that only makes the ice thicker and harder. So it's Satan who always defeats himself ultimately. And so in his mouth, in his mouth is Brutus and Cassius on the right. Who do you think's in the middle? Judas, of course. Judas Iscariot. And here's the ending of the Inferno. Sorry I've taken so long. But the night is coming on and we must go, Virgil says, for we have seen the whole. My guide and I crossed over, this is Dante again, and began to mount that little known and lightless road, to ascend into the shining world again. He first, I second, without thought of rest. We climbed the dark until we reached the point where a round opening brought in sight the blessed and beauteous shining of the heavenly cars, and we walked out once more beneath the stars. That's the ending line. Nice. Remember, he starts, he can see the stars, and as they go down, they disappear, and now he comes out. This has been 3 days. He's retracing the route of Jesus in hell, because you remember your Apostles' Creed, right? He descended into hell. He rose again on the 3rd day. This is the 3rd day. There's a whole thing that I don't understand. Maybe somebody can explain it to me, but they have to wait until Satan's wings, they have to take their moment where they're not going to get hit by the wing, and they start climbing down Satan. And then at some point Virgil just flips around and starts climbing up, but they come out the other side. So maybe somebody knows what that's about. But yeah, the point being that Satan is kind of an inverse polarity. And so to go down is to go up and out and through. And so there you can see the stars again. So notice that in this hero's journey, that Dante, first of all, this is a little unusual because the helper usually leaves you and should leave you because it's your journey. And you have to do that alone. You have to walk that lonesome valley by yourself. But in Dante, Virgil stays with him the whole time. And the journey's not over, by the way. They're going now to Purgatorio and then to Paradiso. Dante has left in this descent his illusions. He has left his fear. And one of the unfortunate consequences is that he becomes more judgmental as a result. But this is a Christian journey. And so that's entirely appropriate for a middle-aged Christian. Well, it is, I'm sorry. A Christian in the Middle Ages. Not a middle-aged. I think we better stop there before I say anything else. Thank you for your attention.